Let's start a podcast about our mental health for no good reason why. Let's call it Mind Cake.
Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome to Mind Cake.
Mind Cake?
With him,
Lee Crompton, and her.
Gail Robertson.
Oh, you're not Paul.
I'm not Paul. I'm
Oh my
sounding a
God.
bit husky, so I thought with a cold, so I thought maybe I could pass myself off as Paul, but
Yeah.
I think it would quickly become apparent when I couldn't talk knowledgeably about so many things. So
Well, 2 points before we start. Firstly, we've done that in one take. It's taken me and Paul, I think, 21 episodes to nail that first time. And secondly, with that in terms of accents, that was superb.
Thank you very much. I was bringing a musicals flavour to it. Musicals are my jam, so I'm doing a little cabaret intro.
Very good. Do you want to explain to people why you're here, Gail?
I am here because Paul is not. Paul is currently down in Manchester living his best Gallagher life with Shark in the Park. And is just not available. And I was available. And he's, to be fair, he's absolutely choked with the cold as well. Sounds even worse than I do, and he's feeling a bit worse. So yes, I've stepped in.
You've stepped into the breach. I think he surely has he has mentioned you on previous episodes. You are Paul's other half. Ironically, the episode that we're doing on work-life balance, Paul is too busy to do the intro and the outro. So we have the lovely Gail instead.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here because I do listen, obviously, every episode, and usually listen to them being recorded as well because I'm downstairs.
You're downstairs. And coming up soon, Gail. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yes. So we recorded a few months back. I was doing a little bit of guest interview for the episode about the menopause because you two felt that it was not for men to discuss. Although I disagree, I think the two of you could have learned a lot and hopefully will from listening to it. But yeah, so we chatted menopause and ladies things with Charlotte, Her Majesty, so me and your pal Jane.
So we dipped out of that one. We will learn all about the menopause when we listen to the episode, and it's with Charlotte, the bee lady. So I think she was one of our first guests. I think she was probably episode 5. And so so that's coming up soon. You guest hosted on it with my friend Jen, the only Jenny that is nice. And we are going, me and the good lady wife are going to Monaco Moor next weekend to try out the bee therapy. So there'll be more news on that. That's
very exciting because I think it sounds amazing. We can also say you've got another guest appearance. Somebody making a comeback because I'm in the kitchen recording this. And you get a delightful hum.
I didn't hear Fraser. Is he back?
Fraser the freezer is here.
I should have known from the backdrop.
Upstairs.
Takes me back to episode 1 in your kitchen.
Yeah.
How is Fraser? Is he all right?
He's doing good. Keeping Lee and Chilly.
Keep him busy. Excellent. Well, shall we, on work-life balance, get straight into the episode with Allison Mandell?
Let's do it.
Okay, so today, I've been very much looking forward to this. We have the pleasure of being joined by Allison Mandell, who is a work-life balance coach and former TV executive producer, showrunner, and director, working on shows such as Running Wild with Bear Grylls, MasterChef, Dancing with the Stars, and am I right in saying Gordon Ramsay was in there as well?
So much Gordon Ramsay.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, let's start with that then, because I mentioned just when we were chatting a minute ago that I had to I didn't employ the bleep machine with the episode with Cam Cooney because he swore a lot.
Yeah.
And did you have similar issues with Gordon Ramsay?
I did MasterChef and I did 24 Hours to Hell and Back with Gordon.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has come to expect and love that the bleeping basically turns into like a heart rate monitor type of situation when you're watching. You let
Yeah.
it happen. So, who's to obstruct the man in his delivery? Certainly
Mm.
not me. But it didn't bother me.
No,
So, and he's quite eloquent. He really just uses the whole English vocabulary like a buffet.
I think I don't know. I've not met Gordon, but I I suspect he's one of these people. It's a persona, and actually in real life he's maybe not quite as verbally aggressive as he comes across.
I don't know about
Okay, this
that.
isn't how I thought this was going to start, but anyway, talking about Gordon Ramsay, but yeah,
Well, I will say he has an intensity. He's one of my favorite hosts that I've ever worked with.
okay.
Super on time, super professional, shows up, gets it done so well. But he was really remarkable. You could feel him, like you knew when he was about to arrive, when he was outside of the building type of thing.
Oh,
Like
like
he's
like a
quite a
Tom Cruise type. I don't want to put him in the same category as Tom Cruise, but Tom Cruise, does he not have that sort of, you pulling a face for listeners?
I'm making it for everyone who's listening.
Yes,
I'm
Alison is
smiling.
pulling a face. So not, but no, people seem to say that Tom Cruise has got that kind of, whether you like him or whether you don't, he's got that kind of air
Yeah,
about him.
energy. Maybe. I have never worked with Tom,
Mm,
but I've heard a very different thing about him, not in terms of energy, but just kind of the
okay.
vibe. But with Gordon, he really he was a force to be reckoned with. And
Mm,
if he got in his way, be it on
mm.
camera or off camera, he was,
Oh, okay.
but he wasn't, I wouldn't describe, he's much more aggressive for camera, but
Hmm.
that level of intensity and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
the high standards, I don't think that goes away.
No, no. Well, this,
But
like I say, this wasn't the episode I was expecting because we should maybe do another entertainment episode another time. And I
yeah,
did.
be fun.
My first question was going to be, how did you go from high intensity, because there's work-life balance issues there, I would imagine anyway, huge. So how and why did you get from a TV executive to a work-life balance coach?
Here, I'll link it to our beloved Gordon. So, when I did the show 24 Hours to Hell and Back, for every episode, I was up for 72 hours straight.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you really did shoot. That wasn't like a lie. We really did shoot, but 24 hours
Yeah.
and you had to shoot before it and after it for the reveal and all these things. And my job as an executive producer was 7 days a week, sometimes 24 hours a day, but usually no less than 17, 18 hours a day.
Wow.
And it was a profession that I really wanted to do. I loved working in television. I loved storytelling. I'd studied it. And you really commit yourself to it. And there's a narrative that your value is associated with your availability, your accessibility, your martyrdom for the craft.
Yeah.
And so there was just this element of incredible sacrifice associated with success. So as a young woman, very young to become an executive producer. And it was directly related. Of course, there were other elements of it in terms of skill set, but a lot of it was also just like, how committed are you? And what are
Mm.
you willing to give? And the industry itself is extremely extractive and exploitative. So I really started to, it made me bitter, to be
Mhm.
honest.
Mhm.
And I thought the bitterness was me because that's what the industry kind of tells you. So this is television, but it's the same for finance. It's the same for real estate. It's the same for nursing and medical. Like there are so many toxic industries
Mhm.
that associate, if you're living in a capitalist society, that associate what you give to your job, what you can be extracted for with your worth.
Yep.
And then it'll make you feel like you're being selfish if you don't like it. And so for a while I got bitter and then I was embarrassed about my bitterness. And then I realized, wait, this is a very sick situation. And I am responding to the toxicity. I myself am not toxic for wanting to sleep 7 hours occasionally,
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I
Not so
started,
much to ask, is it?
yeah, I feel like it's a pretty reasonable thing to be like, I need to drink water. So I started to kind of use my producer mind towards work-life balance. Why are we like this? Why is it that the majority of Americans, which I am American, so my statistics are usually based on that, which is also how Americans function. We like it to be about us. But I started to look at the science, and the majority of Americans are not happy with how much they work, feel exploited. And I'm like, well, how does that happen? Because we're choosing it on some level. And so then I started to get really interested in capitalism. I had quite a spiritual experience that also shifted my understanding of what I wanted for my life. And the more I did research and the more I talked to people about what a good life was, what mattered, what was purpose, I became just so enthralled. And so I started to kind of gradually do less and less producing and more consulting and coaching one-on-one.
Cool.
And here we are.
Well, that's interesting because I found myself working in construction, which isn't something that I would, which is, a lot of numbers, which isn't really, I would say when I was at school, where my skill set was. I'm quite a creative person, and I would like to get, how do I put this? So I had a script optioned by a company owned by a famous comedian, and I thought this was going to be the break. Until the company decided that they didn't want to do scripted anymore. 12 months into the 18-month option agreement, they decided that they didn't want to do scripted anymore, other than the one show that he's very famous for. One of the shows he's very famous for. I'll tell you when we're not recording who it is. But from what you're saying, I'm trying to leap into that toxic arena, because it is like, it takes forever to get anything done. I'm talking about scripted now. Obviously you do, reality and a lot of unscripted, but which I don't know whether that's the same principles apply in trying to get something made and done and what have you. But I suppose from what you were saying, if you don't want to work 17 hours a day, there's a queue of people outside knocking the door down to go, well, I'll do it, I would imagine. And it's just a really difficult industry to get into. And then when you're in it, like you say, you're performing, jump through the hoops, and if we tell you to jump, you say how high, I would imagine.
You would imagine correctly. And not only do they say, okay, well, there's a line of people here who want that, they say, and they'll do it for less. So it's the toxicity level around that, because every single time that I've called that bluff, like especially when I was younger and I was like a story producer, and I would ask for a rate that I knew they had paid a man that had less experience than me, and they would say, well, we're not going to pay you that. I mean, the gender gap is extraordinary in television, and is not just in payment, it's in the way they expect you to dress and show up and all these other things. But I would say, well, I want this, and this is a fair rate. And they would say, we're not going to pay you. You should be happy. You should feel lucky to be asked to work on American Ninja Warrior was the first time they had said that to me. And I was like, I don't feel lucky. I don't give a shit about this show. Just a lot of white guys on the same obstacle course. But it's real.
Don't make me laugh too much, because we cough.
So that was a real thing. And I was like, okay, fine. Try and find someone who can do string outs, who can do interviews. I did like 90 interviews in one day for that show at one point in the heat in Florida. Doing anything in Florida is heartbreaking. So doing a lot of interviews in Florida is like exponentially worse. So I was like, oh, okay, find someone who's willing to take it. And you can call their bluff a lot of times, because if you have the goods, especially if you're writing, no one else is going to write like you, because no one else has your experience and your perspective and your humor. But at the same time, right now, the industry's incredible. My industry fell apart, unscripted fell apart, because of other things that we can talk about at other time, but it all comes down to corporate greed and AI and all these things, which I'm sure you heard about in the AI strike and all of that happened over the years. But, it's a mess. And what it comes down to is, I think in this industry and then a variety of other industries, which is actually quite related to the work I do in work-life balance, is when you have a sense of self-belonging, you have a level of confidence that makes you irresistible. Arrogance requires validation. Confidence is like, take it or leave it, motherfucker. This is what I'm bringing. It's the different if you go on a date with someone. Arrogance has a whiff of desperation to it. It's the strongest smell in the room. If you're confident, you can you're like, okay, if this date doesn't go well, that's fine. That means that there's another one that will. It's that feeling of how you hold what you have to offer, I think, is the strongest factor in terms of dictating how successful you will be. Aside from, you do have to have innate talent, although fuck me, there's a lot of people who have no talent who seem to be selling a shit ton of stuff. And then you also have to be someone who has enough follow through to be able to show up on time, get your meetings in order, deliver what. But if you have those three things, the thing that I find to be the magic ingredient that really does differentiate anyone is that that you have something that no one else has. You're into it. And that's either when you're pitching, and the pitch process is the same, unscripted or scripted, in terms of how do you hold yourself and how do you offer what you have to give? Or if you're on a date, or if you're in a business meeting, and whatever it is, it's always going to be, how much do you have your own back? Because if you have your own back in a real way, you are irresistible.
We're going very off piste here, but I suppose there's two questions that come out of that. One, how do you do that? Because it's easier said than done. And two, you mentioned there that there was something that happened that made you kind of switch from maybe one lane to another lane. And I didn't know whether you minded talking about that at all.
No.
Okay, good.
The thing that happened, so I was someone who, I was like, you know what? I want to be an executive producer. I want to be a showrunner. And I'm going to do it because I'm one of those people that's pretty dogged. And then I did it. And I even sold my own show, which is a very challenging thing. And unscripted, because now we have development departments. And I honestly, I don't know if you guys like South Park, but there's a South Park episode where Cartman is talking about how they decided how to make Ben Affleck movies. And it was just a variety of verbs and nouns in the bingo machine, and they would pull them out and that would be the next movie. I think it was Ben Affleck. It made me laugh so hard. And that's basically what development production companies do. They just they're like, oh, are alpaca farms hot right now? Oh, oh, we love gardening. We're going to do an alpaca gardening, like, outdoor reality competition show. And then fuck it, you have it on television. It's fucking crazy. They'll sell anything. So to sell a show is an individual's heart. So I kind of hit this like apex of what I thought was my career. I wasn't very happy, but I was successful. And I thought that the happiness would catch up. It was almost like, I'm really tired. So once I can like enjoy the fruits of my labor, I'll be joyful, which is not how that works.
Because you sold a show, you smashed it, right? So of course you're going to be happy.
I thought, yeah, exactly. I was like, I did the thing that I thought would never happen. And it was a show I was really proud of. And then right after that, I thought, okay, joy shall find me. Joy shall round the corner and tackle me. And then out of nowhere, I had an extraordinary knowing to do ayahuasca.
Okay.
I hadn't really known anyone who did ayahuasca. Ayahuasca was not on, I don't even know how I knew how to say it. It was really not on my radar. And so I did a series of ayahuasca ceremonies. And
all right, what's I can't even say it.
Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca.
I get to be the person to tell you about ayahuasca.
I've never heard it before in my life.
Oh my God. Well, I am not the best person to like give a dissertation on ayahuasca. It is an incredibly potent plant medicine from the Amazon. It's a combination of a vine and a leaf that is brewed over an extensive period of time.
Okay.
It originates in the Amazon. Many, many years ago, it used to be that a shaman would drink the brew and go on a journey for you and basically help you in whatever issue that you came to the ayahuasquero or the shaman for. Now it's in a little bit of trouble just because as per usual, there's a lot of white people that found it and made it bad. A thing that we do. We started trying to treat it for profit. Now everything's gone crazy. But you can go to the Amazon, or you can go to other skilled and very safe places. I highly recommend making sure they're safe, where you can drink this brew. And it is extraordinary. I've done it 12 times since then. And
Oh, really?
yeah, it is, aside from probably iboga, and I'm sure there are other things that I don't know, but it is absolutely the most intense, transformative medicine you can do.
I'm writing this down. Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca. Ayahuasca. I mean,
Okay.
it's unbelievable. You know, there are people who do like hero journeys with psilocybin where they do like a bunch and they have an ego death. In my experience, ayahuasca is like so much stronger than that. I can't even like describe it. It is wild. But what's interesting about ayahuasca, it's a very healing thing. No one's doing ayahuasca as an escapist mechanism. You can't. It's way too intense. It brings all your shit to the surface. A lot of people who are, I say this because of your story, a lot of people who are diagnosed with a terminal diagnosis will do it. Miraculous things happen because they work through all this stuff, or something physiologically can happen that really shifts them. It's a very, very, very powerful thing. And so I had this.
You drink it.
You drink it. So it's like, it almost has the consistency of like a very strong espresso. It's quite bitter.
Yeah.
And you go up, you're served it. And so help me God, you are getting served by a real shaman. Because if you are, this is not something you do in your college dorm room.
Okay.
I cannot emphasize that enough. You cannot do this alone, especially for your first time. Oh my God.
So this is why I love doing this podcast, because this is not the conversation I thought I was going to be having on this episode.
And here we are.
And here we are. So I take it you didn't go to the Amazon.
I did, but not this
you
first
did?
one.
Right.
Well, I did the first one again in Florida. What was I thinking?
It all comes back
Holy
to Florida.
shit. It all comes back to Florida. My God. I did it in a place that was safe, but it was not done by real shamans.
Okay.
But so then afterwards, I did another kind of look. I basically found out that this is not a thing to fuck with unless you are with real shamans. So I ended up going to a place deep in the Amazon that I had read about that was very well vouched for. And I was like, oh, that's how that ceremony is supposed to go. But the medicine was still really beautiful in the other places I did. So it's a very intense experience. You are completely not in control.
For how long?
It all depends on kind of the brew and such, but it's at least 4 hours.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it's not like 4 hours of like, you know what? It's 4 hours and I'm going to listen to this music. No, you are in another dimension where time doesn't exist. So you can have an experience that felt like it was days, and you come back and you find out
Jesus.
you were out for 4 or 5 hours or something. And so it is a profound experience.
Mm-hmm.
It is truly life-altering experience. So I had, for whatever reason, I don't know why, if you have an interest in ayahuasca, it's something to look into. If you suddenly feel like I'm really fascinated by that, that might mean that it's time to look into it. If you're like, wow, that sounds like something for someone else, you're right. Don't do it. You know, I'm definitely not someone who's like, everyone should drink ayahuasca. They definitely shouldn't. Oh my God, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. I just happened to be one of those people who got pulled into the tractor beam. It was the right time.
Okay.
And so I did that, had the fucking craziest, hardest, and most beautiful time of my life. And afterwards, everything was different. I don't even know how to describe it. It opened up all these gifts, which was wild. Which really scared me at first because I didn't understand them. And it made my understanding of what life is and what we are doing here so much more expansive than what I had held previously, that I just fucking sold a show and I didn't give a shit. You know, I was like, what? And but it was beautiful. I was able to recognize that my job was not my identity, that there was something so much more important happening here. And so I suddenly, it was like I took a step back and I had more perspective. My view was just much wider.
Hmm.
And I think that can happen. That can happen through things like the news that you got in 2020, or it can happen with, a series of events in someone's life or what have you. It doesn't have to be ayahuasca. We all have moments that reorient us to our lives.
Yeah.
And so that was mine. And so that was one of the things that absolutely kickstarted my look into, well, what am I really doing here? And
Hmm.
when I'm on my deathbed, do I want to say, that was a great life because, man, I got those amazing interview bites with Gordon Ramsay? No. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, if I don't make a change, that's where I'm heading. And it's
Yeah.
a really interesting question for anyone to ask themselves if they have something they want to change and they really sit with, well, if I don't make the change, what does my life look like in 5 years? That's a
Hmm.
sobering question.
Hmm.
And is that future riskier than the risk of making a change into the unknown?
Yeah, that is because, like I say, a lot of people, because of the amount of time that you spend at work, a lot of people, there is no separation between, you know, like you say, I am a quantity surveyor. Well, am I a quantity surveyor? Or am I just a person, a writer who happens to earn a living quantity surveying?
Yeah.
Um, and I think, like you say, we spend so much time at work. It's very difficult sometimes not to have that label and people identify you with, oh, you're a whatever. When in actual fact, and that does weigh on me. I have 30 years in the construction industry, was maybe not where I thought I was going to go. But it's now 30 years on, making that leap to, well, what do you do? Where do you go? At the age of 50, with two small kids, what do you do? So loving this chat. I'm loving this chat, but it's like you said, but it's not easy. It's not for everybody, and I don't want to be. I think that's why I'm doing the podcast, why I'm doing the scripts, why I'm doing whatever I'm doing, challenges and what have you, because I don't want to be laying on my deathbed going, oh, am I going to lie on my deathbed and go, oh, I wish I'd spent. Well, I thought I was on my deathbed, and I
Yeah.
thought I wish I'd spent more time quantity surveying.
Exactly.
Um, no, no.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's really important to also highlight that it doesn't mean that then everyone's job has to be like this passion project, right?
Yeah.
A lot of us live in a capitalist hellscape, and we have to do certain things so that we have our basic needs met. That's how they've rigged it. So,
Mhm.
there's no shame in doing a job where you show up and it's not your passion. However, the other thing is like, 30 years ago, our boss couldn't contact us after we left work.
Mhm.
Like, this is crazy. There are
Yeah.
no boundaries
Yeah.
now between. So, not only is it that like our identities are naturally wrapped up in what we do, but we have eroded every boundary around our time.
Yeah.
So, if your boss wants to reach you, well, she or he may just email you at 10 p.m. or
Yeah.
at 6 a.m. and expect you to get back. And the
Mhm.
faster you get back, the better you are to work with. And
Yeah.
that is an incredibly deleterious operating system for us to hold. It's really hard on our health. It's hard on our relationships. It's hard on our sense of self because we feel like we have to choose between our joy and our stability.
Mhm.
That's really challenging. And
Yeah.
that's where this work-life balance thing, I think, really gets supercharged on top of there's a lot of things that happened, relationally that we're taught that make us naturally kind of cater towards being more available than private and having boundaries. But then you
Uh-huh.
add the technological element and we're really up against it.
Well, that brings me neatly onto my first question proper. I feel like I've been chatting for about half an hour already. But why do we never seem to have enough time? And how do we make more time? Because we've got all these gadgets and we've got all these, whether it's washing machines, phones, I remember again going back to quantity surveying. I remember when if you wanted a drawing from the architect, you had to wait by the fax machine while it printed out this thing which you couldn't leave in the sun, because if you left the fax paper in the sun, it would bleach it. And you was waiting as this one bit of paper, this drawing came through. But
Mhm.
now we've got emails and you can send gigabytes of information at a time. So we have all these gadgets and gizmos, whether it's, kitchen equipment or work equipment or whatever it is, to help us manage our time. So why haven't we got more of it?
Yeah, it's a complicated question in terms of, well, the question isn't complicated. The answer is complicated. And if it wasn't complicated and I told you it was really simple, you wouldn't believe me because then we all would have had this already figured out.
Uh-huh.
But I think that a lot of times when we talk about things like AI and it was designed, we thought about technology 30 years ago as like, this is going to be amazing. It's going to make our jobs easier so we can spend more time relaxing. Except we live in capitalism. And if the people who, and I'm not like some conspiracy theorist, I'm not gonna, I'm not into that. I think I come at this from a very practical place, which is just that we are inherently, humans labor. It is part of who we are. We like working, we like being industrious. And in capitalism, our labor is extracted for profit. We can either produce something that can be consumed or we can consume it. So in a very strict sense, in the practical way, we aren't designed, we haven't been taught to relax. Our sense of relaxation typically is about consumption, watching TV, going to a place, or buying a thing, which just fuels the system of profit. So if we weren't all completely saturated in a profit-driven machine, then our phones and our foods and our, ways that we relax when we watch television, for instance, they would be something that was restorative, but they're not. They're all different ways for other people to utilize our life force for profit. So there's that. The other side of it, and this is, I think it can sound really woo-woo, but I really hope that the groundedness of it comes through, is that, and this is a lot of the work that I do, is that we were taught to be of service more than we were taught to take care of ourselves. So what do I mean by that? Dr. Gabor Mate is an amazing doctor who writes a lot about these things. He's exceptional. He talks about something called this choice that we have when we're kids between choosing authenticity or belonging. And we all choose belonging.
Belonging, yeah.
Of course, we have to, because we have to survive, and we have families we belong to and peer groups, and we're humans, we're made for connection. So when we choose belonging, the people who tend to struggle the most with having enough time and work-life balance typically have, in my experience, 3 different things that were praised by their caregivers. Their intellect, how smart they were, how hard they worked, or how well they took care of others. And when you know that you are at your peak value and belonging when you do these things, you will usually create an identity that is based on that. And then when you are then put into a society where you have to belong in order to have your basic needs met, like healthcare and education and, a roof over your head, that relationship gets so heightened. And so there's that. And then the third element, we've got capitalism, we've got the way that we were raised. And then the third element is that we are living in a tech society that doesn't want you to put your phone down.
No.
They're not making that thing faster because they're like, oh, if we get Lee this information, we know that he's going to be able to put his phone down and hang out with his kids more. No, they're getting you that information faster because they know that at this point, if your brain has to wait more than 2 seconds for something to load, there's like a 50% chance you'll just close it and put your phone down. So like right away, we're just in this situation where your gadgets want to hypnotize you so badly into staying on. The guy, I can't remember, he's the son of someone very famous in the world of tech, but he created the code that allows for mindless scrolling. And he said it's like the biggest regret of his life.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's in one of the, I think it's in one of the Netflix documentaries.
Really? Yeah. funny. That's a meta situation that's uncomfortable for them. They're like, are you still watching? Because you should also watch these movies about this thing about how you should probably stop watching. Um,
But
but
this is the thing. So that we've had so my clinical psychologist, Dr. Jan, has done a couple of episodes,
oh,
and
cool.
she is going to do an episode coming up with like top 5 apps, like wellness apps, because you've got it's like sleep apps, and we know what I mean, the general. But
Yeah.
there's a paradox there, isn't there? Because you've got yes, I want to be more mindful, or yes, I want to be more, sleep better or whatever. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to get an app on my phone
Yeah.
to help me do that. So it's not lost on us that we're going to be exploring that kind of relationship between tech and switching off, or using tech to switch off, allegedly.
Yeah. I mean, it's nuts because even if you're like, well, I have my shit together. You know, I'm very disciplined or whatever, however you want to frame it. You're a human being if you're listening to this, unless you're a dog, because cats aren't going to listen. And if you're a dog, hello, I love you. But if you're a human being and you're listening to this, that means you have neurotransmitters. If you have neurotransmitters, that means that every time your phone gives you a notification, you get a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
And you have cortisol when you get your email. You've got adrenaline when you get your news, because if you don't, I'm super worried about you because the shit's on fire. But we're in this incredible mix of neurotransmitters just by having your phone near you.
I was going to say,
So
is that one of the biggest things that you come across when you're working with clients? Is that top of the list?
it's one of my favorite things to go to because it's the fastest way to restore your nervous system to a semblance of peace where you can actually hear what you really want. So much of our day, most of us start our days on our phones, which is my first recommendation. Get your phone out of your bedroom. It'll help more than your sleep. You know what I mean? But it's really important to get your phone away from you because it will, when you are in a state of reaction, the very nature of being in a state of reaction is that you're not centered in who you are. You're responding, right? You're handling external stimuli. So one of the first things I encourage people to do is have a pocket of time in their morning before I call it letting the world in, where you're just in your own energy. Because honestly, how much of our days are we in our own energy at this point?
Yeah, none.
And how can you even know what you want? And that, to me, is when you ask the other question of, so how do we find balance? What the fuck is finding time? How do we even do it if everyone feels like they're running out of time? To me, I think when people think about work-life balance, they think about, I'm going to not work more than 7 hours a day, and I want to spend this much time with my kids, and I want to spend this much time with my partner. I want to spend this much time on my hobbies. And they think it's about a time ratio. And the way I invite people to think about it is that it's more about where your orientation point for the day is from. If you are centered in yourself, if you have a relationship with yourself, if you actually know who you are in moments of stillness, if you know what you really want from your life and listen to it, the way that you experience your day changes. The way that you interact with the people in your life change. There's actual presence. How many times have we had coffee or lunch with a friend and they're checking their phone the whole time and we're like, this guy sucks, we can't, or we're that person and we're like, I suck. I just did that, right? So that's a big difference. And I think that's why that's why productivity hacks are bullshit. That's why so much of what we're sold is bullshit, because it's still working within the broken paradigm of trying to dominate your day. What I'm speaking about is that if you actually have a sense of belonging, if you know what you want, if you know who you are, if you have practices that are built into your life that allow you to be with yourself, then your day inherently becomes structured differently. And that's the other part of the work I do, which is actually scheduling that, because I think people have this block that I've seen in myself where we have like our spiritual time or what we want, and then the day comes in and we're like, fuck it. It's like you throw the stack of papers up and you're
Yeah.
like, let's do this. And you're just trying to get as much as you can done. And then you say to yourself, I think every person at some point has said this, I will do the thing that feels good when I deserve it by getting everything else done.
Yeah. Yeah. When I've done my chores,
Yeah.
I get my reward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, and then you'll wake up 30 years later and
Yeah.
you'll go, fuck.
Yep. As I say, I do these podcasts because I'm just, at a point where things are shifting for me and just belief systems and going off at a complete tangent, talking about news. How are you prepared for the American Civil War?
It's funny. I had a moment in 2020 where I had this realization that I learned that it didn't matter how many times I cried in my car, it had no impact on the election. That was rough. That was rough when I was like, oh, my anxiety doesn't change this.
Uh-huh.
No. I still vote the same, which is not for that psycho. I am feeling great about it. I don't know. I am, if this isn't clear just by being a woman with opinions, I don't like Trump. And I think Biden is a really wonderful man.
Mhm.
And it would have been cool for this all to happen like 30 years ago for his prefrontal cortex, but it didn't.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
the way that I've been experiencing politics in the United States has been holding a lot of compassion
Mhm.
for both sides. I have family that is extremely conservative, and I have family that's really liberal, such as myself. And I think what's really interesting, and I've seen it with the Middle East as well. I was raised Jewish, and I just experienced that for me personally, although I am horrified and can get pretty worried, I have recognized that the more I other everyone, the more I am absolutely part of this shit show.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I am just trying to hold both sides with open hands.
Yeah. And I guess it's that thing that, I find that anxiety can be caused by micro, your day-to-day shit, or global, the bigger. And we all know that you shouldn't worry about the things that you can't control. And we can't control the election, but it's very difficult to. I mean, yeah, with this shooting and because was he sworn in today?
Who sworn in?
Trump, was he not sworn in as the candidate for?
Oh, he was. Yeah, he went to the
Yeah.
RNC.
And I haven't seen any of the, and it's probably best that I haven't seen any of the footage, but I would imagine he's, to use a Scottish-ism, he's a bit like fucking Braveheart, where, he survived. He's the Terminator. He survived the shooting and he's now, you know, it's worrying. It's worrying. But like you say, what do you do about it? You can cry in your car as much as you like, but it's not going to change anything. You've got
Yeah,
one vote.
he's totally worrisome. I think he's like incredibly worrisome. He's he is a calcification or an extraordinary distillation of hatred in human form, and yet he existed and he did not come to power because he's just so charismatic. It's like people brought him there,
Mhm.
and it's really disgusting. It's deeply worrisome. If he were to be, I'm gonna air quote the word elected again, because I don't even know what the fuck we're doing every 4 years here anymore. But if he were to be, quote, elected, the devastation that he would have on personal lives is really extraordinary, not to
Mm.
mention, I don't know, like a global cataclysm of climate change.
Yeah.
So yeah, the stakes are real high,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I go, it's I have to hold suffering and witness consciousness. He brings me there. He brings me to like pinnacle of spirituality where I'm like, we must both experience human suffering and remember that we are souls in a witness, because otherwise I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. So I literally have to just be like, okay, we're
Mhm.
here, things are
Mhm.
being cleared. I think that if you want bigger change, which we need because our democracy is really struggling, someone as malevolent as him actually needs to come along so that we can be like, let's restart the computer.
Yeah.
That was really rough malware, and all of our personal information is on the dark web now, as a country, but let's restart and let's refresh. So that's my hope. And then the other thing that I've learned is just that I cannot listen to the news all the time. I treat the news like I treated the debate like I did the Michael Jackson documentary. Did you hear about that Oprah one? It was a couple years ago.
No.
She did a very in-depth documentary about Michael Jackson and his, what I believe to be very true accusations of abuse and such with his victims.
Okay.
It was a very long, in-depth thing. And I think it's important.
I thought Oprah was his pal.
His what?
I thought she was his friend, but they're not pals. Him and Oprah.
Oprah? I
Yeah.
think that she was like, uh-oh, you done wrong, Michael. By all the bad stuff you did, which you definitely did. And I mean, whatever the case was, she did this documentary and I thought about it and I was like, could I watch this? I could. Or I could ask someone else who has more bandwidth to watch this, who already plans on watching it, to just tell me what I need to know. And they did. And it took like 90 seconds. And I was like, wow, that's
You were
really
done.
And I was done because we all have different bandwidths. And I'm not a service to the world if I watch 6 hours of Michael Jackson testimony. So I did the same thing with the debate because I was like, I already know that this guy's full of shit and this guy's a little too old for my taste, but still has a good heart.
Yeah.
And then my partner, I was like, what was it? And my partner was like, this is what happened. And I was like, fuck, that was all I needed. So I think knowing what we're capable of and only letting the amount in and then taking action. Because the other thing that's fucking crazy is that people think now that posting on Instagram is taking civic action, and it definitely isn't. So like, that's nuts to me that people are just like, you know what, I'm going to take a stand by making this post about my feelings on my Instagram stories to the echo chamber people who follow me. God bless and Godspeed. But I'm like, this is not
changing anything.
Yeah. So love the protesters that are really out there doing the hard work. But yeah, it's a nightmare over here. I mean, how's it going over there? It's not exactly like there's a beacon of democracy shining from your side either.
Well, I mean, yes and no. We've had a complete shit show, without putting my colours to the mast, with 5 prime ministers or 4 prime ministers in 5 years, or the other way around. I can't remember, but we've had Boris, we've had Liz Truss, we've had, some wallopers, to use a Scottish term, and doing unspeakable things.
Yeah.
And getting away with it. And Keir Starmer, am I a Labour voter? Do I think he's going to do a good job? I don't know, but I quite like the fact that he seems like a decent guy. He seems like he's got a moral compass.
That's
and he's a bit dull. And I'll take dull at the moment. If he gets the job done, the deputy prime minister, I think she's the deputy prime minister, has a working class background. The chancellor is I've heard interviews with her and she seems very, very good. So I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see what happens in France.
Yeah.
This is a whole new podcast with the left and the right. But no, I think the fact that we've now got a Labour government and such a huge majority in the UK is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because what we've had with Brexit and COVID and everything else has been a complete shit show. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. And we just need a few other results to go just not extremist ways. And who knows, we could be in a different position. But like you say, you can't worry about things that you can't control. And I'm just conscious, I think I've only asked like one question off my list. It's my bedtime.
I love it.
So that was Allison Mandell talking about, well, half of Allison Mandell, because we got 45 minutes into the chat and I'd only asked one of my questions. So we will divide this over 2. But yes, the first half of work-life balance. So in terms of time management, it wasn't great because we went over. But am I right in saying, Gail, that you found that there's a quiz or a test on a website?
That's right. Yes, I went and had a little rootle around, and yeah, when you go on our website, one of the first things is a little free test you can do. Just need to
Oh,
pop your email address in to get your results. It's just, I think it was 8, fewer than 10 questions.
okay.
And certainly straight like a Cosmo quiz,
Yeah.
multiple choice kind of thing. What was things like what's the first thing you do in the morning, and how do you feel during your working day, stuff like that. So I went through mine, got my results, and I was unsurprised by mine.
What does it reveal?
I'm a people pleaser.
Are you?
I'm a people pleaser, and that is my greatest obstacle. So yeah, I'm quite bad with that. I take it on myself.
I
I
feel
think.
bad that you've stepped into the breach now, Gail.
See, here we go. But this is what I do. I like to be helpful. I do. I'm a helper. We did a thing with my work, and it kind of gave you a reading. You were like a color. She started going through it, and about 15 minutes into this whole day session we're doing, I was like, oh, I'm a green, I'm a helper.
Hmm.
And then she's talked more about it. I was like, yeah, I'm a green, I'm a helper. And then you got your results in the afternoon, and yes, I was
You were
green and
green.
I was
You
a
were a
helper. And
helper.
not only that, was I predicted my own. You had to do a session test on that as well. And I think, the only person who got there is almost exactly like how I saw myself.
Uh-huh.
And how the test revealed me was almost exactly the same.
That is good
Yeah.
in terms of self-awareness, at least. Because like I say, most people think, oh yeah, no, I'm definitely this. And you're like, you're so not.
Oh, there was a few of those in
Mm.
this session were quite entertaining, but yeah, no, I like to be helpful. That's how I get my yayas, is I feel like I'm doing a good job. But the downside of that is, yes, you can just always put other people first, even if they don't want you to, don't expect you to. You do. And it's funny, I didn't really think about that. In terms of a work-life balance, I would have said that I had a very good work-life balance. So when I was a teacher, I was very good at, knowing like that was when my working day had to end, because there's always more you can do as a teacher.
Yeah.
You would just be non-stop. So I would sort of start at 7:30 in the morning, and then I would be there till absolute latest would be 6 o'clock, and no later than that. And when I left, and nothing came home with me except in really like dire circumstances, like there was something that couldn't wait. Because there's always more to do in any job. There's always more to do. There's always stuff you could take on
Hmm.
if you wanted to. So I was always very good at drawing boundaries and doing that. And now in my current job, I do things like I work and I schedule in my lunch hour, and I use a Pomodoro timer. So I thought this was nonsense, right? Because I'm sit down and rattle through my work type, and I was just getting exhausted. And then I found this thing where it's a wee timer you can get them online. It's called a Pomodoro timer after the tomato. So the kitchen timers look like tomatoes.
Yeah.
Tomato. And you work for 25 minutes, and then you stop for 5. 25.
Okay.
And then every 3 or 4 sort of sections, you get a 15-minute break. And I thought that's surely going to be nothing but a nightmare, because you're just getting into the flow of a piece of work, and then you have to stop
Yeah.
and start. Honestly, it's brilliant. For me, it works brilliantly, and I like to get really thick in, but then what happens is you go too deep into your little rabbit hole and you exhaust yourself. So what you do is just take your wee 5 minutes and you stand up and you do a wee stretch, you go and stroke the cat for a little while. It's not a euphemism. So yeah, you do that, and then you go back. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. I highly recommend it. So between that and my scheduling, I thought, I think I've got quite a good work-life balance. But yeah, I think maybe it's given me something to think about.
I would say that the fact that you're here stepping into the breach, doing a podcast when you're ill, probably tells you everything you need to know without having done the quiz. So going back to the timer, it is one of those things like a kitchen timer that's like a tomato.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's named after, but I just use an online one.
Oh, I see. You don't actually use a tomato.
No, I think that would annoy me. I quite like as well being able to see the countdown. Sometimes if you're not feeling particularly inspired, you're like, oh, only 5 minutes to go, and I can take a break.
Right, okay, so you just have it like on screen.
Yeah, just have it on the screen, and it just does a little buzz.
25
So
minutes, 5 minutes off.
Yeah, this is kind of a teacher thing. I used to using timers in the classroom quite a
Mm.
lot, so I'm quite used to using these kinds of. I think it's quite an effective way of working. It doesn't work if you have meetings,
Yeah, yeah.
obviously. Just if you're sitting, that's when you're most likely to go down a rabbit hole. You're sitting writing reports or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. You're doing big pieces of screedy writing. Do you think you would be able to use something like that in your job, or?
Yeah, again, meetings permitting. But again, that's what a lot of Alison does, is like scheduling and saying, you know, she said in the chat that we had, is you've only got a finite amount of time. If you imagine you've got that ball of time, if you're using all of that ball to work, you're gonna overload yourself. So at least, you know, go, right, well, in the certain portions of the day, I am going to spend, you know, and schedule out again. I think going back to Jan's cards in terms of core beliefs. So for me, for example, one of mine was creativity, and that's one thing that's getting me in the minute. I'm not having any time to write, so I need to factor into my schedule that yes, we all need to work, but then factor in, but stop at that point. Don't keep on trying to get more guests on the podcast or sending emails, or I'll just when you don't then have time for self-care or writing or whatever it is that happens to be your thing.
And that's the part that gets lost first. I think the self-care is the first thing to go.
Yeah.
Even stupid things like both Paul and I have been just so crazy busy the last couple of months. He's been doing his shows, and I was helping out at the show last week, and I was at work, and he's been doing his rugs, and
He loves a rug. He does love a rug.
he bloody loves a rug, and then just busy weekends. And you shouldn't be complaining, because often you're busy doing nice things, but you are busy. And then what happens is we don't go food shopping, and we just are eating sort of random, you know, so we're stopping off and grabbing a ready meal or a pizza on the way home, and it's just carbs, and you're not getting any goodness. So, and that's self-care in itself, and that's the first thing that goes for us, is the eating. You probably don't have that so much. I don't know, because you've got the girls, so you'd have to be sort of eating healthy. But then I don't know, unless they're well into like their crispy pancakes.
For all we've been doing the nutrition episodes and whatever, sometimes, quite a lot of the time, they end up with chicken nuggets, chips, and beans, just because of time. Gemma's working, I'm working, and whatever, that you just don't get time to, you know, to shop and then prepare. So yes, I have had a subsequent chat with Alison about scheduling and work-life balance or whatever. So I may have more to report on that, because I think I might try the timer thing. That sounds good.
Yeah.
But,
so is that sort of a private, like, if you know what I mean, a private chat, like a specific off the back of your interview?
Yeah.
You know, that's what you can do, is once you have your problem identified, the next stage is to contact Alison and then arrange for a proper one-to-one consultation.
So she does. So yeah, you can go on the website and you can book a half-hour consultation. It's free. Where she talks you through what she does and what challenges you're facing and blah 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 blah, and then you can decide to do, I think it's like a 6-part course with her, which I think would be fun to do, because like you say, at the minute there's a lot of plates spinning, and sometimes it's just impossible to keep them all from.
You sometimes need someone else and a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and somebody to stop and make you see things a bit more clearly, because you get so caught up in the maelstrom of it.
Yeah.
See, here's me going, I've got my work-life balance sorted, and clearly I don't.
Now doing a podcast.
Yeah.
One thing Alison did say, because she used to obviously do the shows with Gordon Ramsay, was that if it was not a dull bit, but if the episode needed a bit of spicing up, shall we say, that they would bleep stuff out that doesn't actually. So she said one part she has bleeped out tuna sandwich, because she goes, because people don't know, and people go beep 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 and think, oh, it's getting, things are hotting up in the kitchen, it's getting wild in there. But no, she said she bleeped out tuna sandwiches is the most innocuous one she's ever had to bleep out, just to make it sound more spicy in the kitchen.
That's hilarious. I feel like we need to do some bleeping out of our own.
We should do that. What else do we need to do? We need to do the results of the poll. The votes are now closed. And I have to say, Gail, we have quadrupled the number of votes that we had on the previous poll.
That's amazing.
So we now have 4. We only had one. We only had one vote for does supporting Heart Midlothian give you a pooey bottom? And that was a unanimous no, it doesn't. We've now had 4 votes for after the Giuliano episode, does pineapple belong on a pizza? The results are in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a split decision. 2 for no, 2 for yes, which means that we get the deciding vote. Well, go for it. What does
That's me.
pineapple belong on a pizza?
Yes.
Oh,
I knew you wouldn't be. I like a wee Hawaiian pizza.
no.
It's actually the only time I'll eat pineapple. Oh,
But you'll only eat pineapple if it's on a pizza.
yeah.
Well, there's only one thing for it. Then we'll have to give Paul the deciding vote, and I think I know the answer.
I know the answer.
It's no, isn't it?
It's a no. So
It's
the
a no.
no's have
So
it.
the answer. So the result of the poll is 4-3 in terms of no pizza, no pineapple on a pizza. Thank you.
I mean, it would only go on a Hawaiian. I wouldn't have it like on a meat feast from Domino's.
No, it doesn't matter, does it? It's still pineapple on a pizza. We're not. We've done pizza. We've got another episode with Allison to do. So I think we're just. Oh, we haven't done. Are you going to do his housekeeping?
I don't think I can. You might have to do that because
Right.
I
Well,
don't
what we'll
know all the
do.
details as well as I should.
Right. What we'll do Gail Robertson's housekeeping, and then we'll just play some tumbleweed. Gail Robertson's
housekeeping. Oh, how very lovely.
That wraps that up. Nobody emails anyway, Gail, so it's really no problem. And I think we will call it a night. Thank you so much for stepping into the breach.
You're most welcome. It's been fun.
We're going to do another one in a minute for part 2. Yes, thank you all for listening. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's start a podcast about our mental health for no good reason why. Let's call it Wine Cake.
Gail, what we forgot to ask is what is this week's poll? And seeing as how you mentioned about the timers, do you think it's good to do the Pomodoro timer where you do 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off?
Pomodoro or Pomodoro? No. Boom.
Please vote.